had no clue I had anything mental health related. To me, it was all normal. I was screaming inside and didn't know what to do with it. So I was a leader who didn't know manage emotions very well. But I decided quietly to study myself. I now teach Tai Chi, brain education, brain sports. The only thing we have control over is our behaviors and our actions. Make them amazing, make them disruptive, create the change you want to see.
Hey, it's Jen Valenga here. We interviewed Collette Hemmings, the founder and CEO of Brain Sports, on January 12th, 2023. As usually happens with our podcast interviews, we turned off the live stream and we started talking about things that I wish we'd recorded. One of the important things she said is that confidence, consistency, and clarity, the 3 C's, are elements that she thinks are really important for leadership of all kinds. When you're confident, consistent, and clear, others believe in your ability to lead. Even if you don't always feel those things, if you appear to have the 3 C's, it makes a difference. This held her in really good stead as a VP of Nike Worldwide and also as an exec for the Levi Strauss company. Here's episode 46 with Collette Hemmings. She is a very tall Scottish woman. You will love listening to her voice. Welcome to the Speak with Presence podcast, where perfection is overrated. Leaders listen, and everyone speaks up to influence change. I'm Jen Valenga.
I'm Jennifer Rutley-Thomas, and we are co-founders of Voice First World, as well as the co-host of the Speak with Presence podcast. I'm really excited because we had the opportunity to cross paths with Collette Hemmings. She is the Brain Sports CEO, and let me define that. That is Chief Energy Officer. I love that. I'm excited to say that today she's coming to us from Scotland. I'm ready to jump into the conversation, but before we do that, Jen, do you mind sharing something?
Sure. Yep. This is for Collette.
I think the world of her, and I just have so much respect for her, and she acts with such high integrity in everything that she does. She has had an extremely impressive career at Nike. Her teachings are just incredible. I hold her opinion and her decisions in just very high regard.
That is from Michelle Dahl.
Let's bring her on.
Okay, here she is.
Hi, that was beautiful. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks, Collette, for being here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here from Bonnie, Scotland.
How much time do you split between Scotland and some time in the US?
It's mainly in the US, mainly in Arizona.
Well, Collette, before we dive into, I would like for you, I know when I met you for the first time, I was just intrigued by 20 years of extensive leadership experience that you had. Do you mind just giving a 1 to 2 minute overview of what your career was like and how it led into your current position today? Because I think that will give more context.
Yeah, sure. 2 minute, kind of high level. Born in Scotland, obviously never lost the accent along the way. I am technically a textile engineer. I went to design college in Scotland, the only one in Scotland. So that was the start. I worked at Levi Strauss for 8 years in Central Europe and in Scotland when they used to have manufacturing in Scotland. And my vision was really to have my 2 kids, at the time they were very young, to be brought up in other cultures. That was the family vision. And so that led to international, at the time companies weren't really global. Now they are, we don't even think about it. And that led to Belgium, central headquarters for Levi's, and then eventually to headquarters in Amsterdam with Nike. That was 8 years later. And then I moved to China, as you do. So I was in Shanghai for a few years with a young family. Then to America for the first time, world headquarters. And then I worked in Africa quite a lot, Nigeria, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. We can talk a wee bit about that. And then also headed up, was the president of the footwear office for Nike in Indonesia, first woman there in 27 years. So, and my latest job was the vice president of the world headquarters, all the real estate. And so you can see from being a textile engineer, no relationship on the surface but I love working with people. So And now my job is, uh, long story short, and I'll share more, I went on my own personal journey for the last 16 years, studying myself, the brain, the human brain, always been fascinated by the mind, and how sports can change the world as well. So I now run brain sports, and that's like social media platforms focused on body, mind, emotional health, specifically for athletes and coaches. And that's it to today.
Quite a global journey at a time when it hasn't been always easy for women in leadership. That is a really great place to start, to be able to do so many different things in corporate and in leadership, coming from an engineering background.
I look at everything in terms of the brain. So it's like, are both sides working well? The left side's the kind of organized side, the right side social.
Yeah.
So, but I had to train the social side a lot, and the corporate life really helped me do that.
Because you had to speak to so many different kinds of people as a leader?
Yes, and I'm 6 foot tall Scottish woman with this accent, so there's other factors. It's yeah, and I really love other cultures. That was my passion, still is.
I would love to know a story of a time when you experienced some kind of gender bias in the workplace as a leader.
Yeah. I think I had some naivety when I started, to be honest, when I started as a young leader. I
Mhm.
really believed everybody you could trust. Um, and the first time I was really aware of gender bias, we had let's call it an experiment, this was when I was in Europe in 2003 when I just moved to Nike. And the good news was there was an awareness that there was a real issue in like the men understanding the women leadership at that time. This was early 2000s. And we did what was called like a fishbowl. It was called like a fishbowl experiment. And actually, it was pretty powerful because I think a lot of the men in particular watching, women in everyday practice, we kind of role played what our experiences were. And I think it was pretty progressive at the time, actually,
Yeah.
And we were role playing what we experienced on a day to day basis while the male leaders were watching. So I found that really stuck with me for my whole career at Nike. And a lot of the men at that time were really surprised by some of the things the women were saying and experiencing. And much of that was about being heard and being seen in meetings. Taking those, I think women intuitively stop and pause, reflect, they're intuitive, generally speaking, and just bringing awareness to that is another style of leadership.
Mhm.
At that time, I think we've moved on a little bit in some respects, but at that time, there wasn't really much conversation on that. So that was kind of one big example that certainly resonated with me. And the other one was with hindsight when I naively jumped on what I thought was Operation China Shanghai. So I had a young family. My daughter was 13 years old, and my son was at the time about 8. And my simple mind at the time was that I raised my hand and I wondered why everybody wasn't raising their hand. I was like, this is like the best opportunity ever in my small mind at the time. And that's how it turned out in the end. But what I didn't realize was you really had to do a lot on your own. The network was very male.
Yeah.
In fact, I think completely at the time, there was one other woman.
Was it a global team? People
Yes,
from different countries?
yes,
Yep.
yes. So it was international operations, and my job was to set up the office from scratch. So there wasn't an office that existed at the time. It's now, I think, one of the largest offices. But at the time, there's I think there's an advantage in naivety, but there's also you have to do it the hard way. So what I realized with hindsight was I wasn't in the network, the natural network that existed already.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize the questions to ask, so I was kind of floundering a lot on my own in the beginning.
Mhm.
What do I do next? And it wasn't a natural pick up the phone. I certainly wasn't American. I didn't have the American culture background, and I think a lot of people thought I was American,
Ah.
you know? So, came from Nike headquarters but, so that was very enlightening, actually. It was probably the most challenging job in my career, but the greatest adventure ever. Like, with hindsight, it was the most formative, so I would say, like, because it was difficult not to avoid it, but, yeah, and that's simple things like getting invitations to certain events, or there's certain meetings coming up, people don't necessarily think about you.
Mhm.
Intuitive, you know? I think women intuitively are like, "Oh, what about John?" And we go through all the name list, and we remember things for the last 10, 20 years. But that wasn't, it was very operational. But, part of that I loved. Uh,
Did you feel left out? Is that what you're saying, that you were left out sometimes?
I didn't feel left out, but I think with hindsight, I felt left out.
Gotcha. Ah.
But during it, I think I struggled more than I needed to.
Mm.
That's how I would describe it. I didn't even realize in my naivety, "Oh, this is really, really hard." It didn't have to be that hard, I guess is what I'm saying. Had I guess, been briefed or buddied, mentorship, I had some great people around me and that put me in that position, but then it's like, you're kind of dropped from the sky and, get on with it. I don't think that's the case as much today.
And the role play that you talk about from the beginning tells the power of story in a way that doesn't feel as accusatory, let's call it.
Mm. Yeah, I saw on your website about the importance of communication and stories
Mhm.
as a leader. And I think I felt I missed that a little bit. It was because that's my culture. It's all storytelling, and some of it's true and some of it's not, but it doesn't really matter. It gets the point across. It's a cultural thing. And so things like decks, I didn't know what a deck was, like a corporate deck. What's your elevator pitch? Language like that was very unfamiliar at the time. Of course, not now.
Right, right.
Was there a mentor in your life or somebody that helped you better understand that?
Well, here's another dimension to this. I was not great at asking for help. So, and I
Yeah.
think just that statement alone, every woman on the planet will nod their head and say,
Yeah.
yes, me too, for quite a long. So I wasn't trained to ask for help. Actually, I did athletics and sports, and I was brought up in a very, very male, masculine environment. So, in answer to your question, I would say yes, but they showed up quite late in the day because I didn't know how to ask for help. I thought doing the hard work and my work was my worth. That's where I was at that time on my leadership journey. And I wasn't equipped to say, listen, just pick up the phone and call this leader and that leader. That wasn't my style at the time.
So, what advice then would you, sitting here today, would you give to a woman that's in a similar position to where you were? And it doesn't matter, 10, 20 years ago. What would your advice to her be?
Pick up the phone, really, or pick up or FaceTime, or communication is everything. And it doesn't matter if you have no clue what to say, and overcome your own inhibitions. So in some of my case, I wanted to appear that I knew what I was doing, and I really had no idea. And now I would say, in the world we live in, that's okay. In fact, the best leaders I worked with are the ones who had very little ego
Hmm.
and were very curious about me, felt like they were curious about who I was as a leader.
Oh,
And
curiosity is a big part of it, and that
yes,
ability to not be perfect.
That's right. And I was, the athletics, the perfectionist mind is, and you talk a lot about this as well, is destructive, actually,
Mhm.
for the soul.
Yes.
Perfectionism is what really destroys our spirit.
Mhm.
And we only are perfectionists because everyone else told us to be a certain way, you know? So the secret, what I would say to any young woman, actually any young leader,
Yes.
is as much as you can be yourself. Like stay in your body, pick up the phone and just say, can you help me get, people love to help. Just one small thing. And it can be like a spreadsheet, pick anything and make that connection point, and that unravels to other leaders and just make the first step.
I love that you say people love to help. People are willing to help, but the person who needs to ask often thinks, well, no one wants to help me. Why can't we reverse that? Why can't we see it in both lenses? It's crazy.
Yeah, totally true. Yeah, and I think women, we really need educated about it's a it's a gift to ask for help. You're actually handing someone a gift.
Yes. Mhm.
Well, I'm going to ask you, Colette, and I think in the space that you are currently, this will resonate. Maybe I think for myself, I definitely could have asked for more help, but I think that there were times where I knew where I had some voids, and I did ask for some mentorship or some sponsorship, whatever term you want to use. In a couple of cases, I didn't get that support, but I wish I would have taken more opportunity to invest in myself
Hmm.
if I needed to get that expertise.
Hmm.
Did you find throughout your career that you took time to invest in yourself in whatever way that may be?
Well, my case of asking for help was really bad, actually, and it took a couple of women leaders actually by the time I got to the US. So until China, um, the first recollection I have of self care was in like 2009, which was pretty late in my career.
Mhm.
I'd had trainings and I was a facilitator and all the other stuff, but self care was against my, literally against my religion.
Yep.
So it, it it took almost being prized out of my small self, and it was a group of 10 women in 2009 who were, let's say, alternative leaders, and we together did a training program with an incredible woman. I'm actually certified in her program, and we still talk every month to this day.
Wow.
We've gone through babies, grandkids, weddings, divorces, everything together. So that community, and what would happen was they would show up in meetings and it would just be that small smile in the audience from that
Yes.
one woman, enough, in my case anyway, to get me through that presentation I really didn't want to do or felt threatened for whatever reason. And we're just best of friends today. It's it's worth hanging on to those women for dear life.
We had the privilege of being in the same city with one of our former clients, and they always say one of the best, most unexpected parts of working in really any coaching program, but in our, specifically in this case, was the community of women and understanding that women, especially in different industries, are going through the exact same thing. And to hear them go,
That's right.
we've got your back. We're listening. We hear you. You can do this. Or congratulations, celebrating them. That community is so important, and especially now post pandemic, I think.
I love that.
Is there anything else that you think could be pivotal as we think of needing to make change in 2023?
Mm,
What would be that change that you would say to women? I mean, ask for help.
yeah, and it's we're at a stage now, I think, where we're all kind of screaming inside.
Yeah.
It's so in my case, I was screaming inside and didn't know what to do with it. So I was a leader who didn't know manage emotions very well. And so things like the anger, the rage, all the other things, right? So when you talk about being disruptive, I decided in 2006, I was very sick after China, very stressed, anxiety, depression, you name it. I kept it all inside. I was bent over double in the car going to the office for a year. Da da da. I think we've all got these stories. That's the truth. But I decided quietly to study myself with martial artists, Korean martial artists, for about 3 or 4 years. And I now teach Tai Chi, brain education, brain sports. Um, I had no clue I had anything mental health related. To me, it was all normal. But everybody's got these kind of. So, what I would say to young leaders today is study yourself. The only thing we have control over is our behaviors and our actions. Make them amazing, make them disruptive, and make them, without being kind of cliched, but create the change you want to see, type of thing. So when I was, and I just want to share this, I know we're probably short on time, but there's one example I wanted to share after I had this fire burning inside me for a long time in terms of mental health solutions for leaders, for executives to be aware of what was actually going on in the workplace. It drove me crazy. And I would be like, can you not see that they're all struggling? Can you not see that that person da da da? So I'm the empath leader, right? And that's becoming more the norm, but it was certainly not at the time. And so my way of navigating the world is through my body, very somatic. I feel energy strongly, feel the room, that type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say to anybody is study yourself to the best of your ability and surround yourself with the energy you want to be in. What I chose to do, I was so paralyzed with fear about presenting in front of people with this accent, being 6 foot tall, da da da. I had all these stories, right? But I kept getting pulled. Collette, would you please share this? Right? And I was a vice president. So you can't be shy in corporate, you know? And I started very small with my team at lunchtimes doing meditation and just giving them the courage. So I was like, I have to be courageous enough to stand and do this weird stuff as it was at the time in front of my team for them to be okay with it. 10 years later, 4 different positions, I brought into Nike the first mindset event, October 11th, 2018. 1,000 people signed up within the first 2 hours. I could sense the demand was there 10 years before. And I was like, I will leave the day this happens. And when I was on the stage in front of 1,000 people, our largest conference center, and I had Native American drummers, I just brought the most weird and wonderful people together on the stage. And I was like, I'm prepared to sacrifice everything. I had that mind by then. And I remember being in the moment on that stage and like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. This is where I just feel, and I relate it to the theatre actually. You know, I'm not actor or anything, but I relate it to that energy that flows through the body when you're in the zone. And it happened to me on that stage that day. 10 months later, I left and I never went back to corporate. And I was terrified most of the time. Really, that feeling of, and that's when I was like, this is for me. This one's for me. You know, so realize what's for you and keep following that thread.
Yeah. My freshman year as training as an actor in undergraduate, one of our classes was Tai Chi.
Oh, wow. It's amazing. I mean, everybody, it's just energy in the body.
Yeah, and you have to as a performer in any way, when you have to be on the stage in front of a bunch of other people, you have. So many people think actors are fakers. They're actually truth tellers. They have to be completely authentic and honest to step into the shoes of another human being. But I love that the idea that you brought that out in an organization that's about athletics, because I'm constantly looking at the connection between athletics and performance. Both
That's
use the
right.
term performance, both have audiences, fans. My son was a high school athlete, and I just spent all of my time making connections between theater and sports and how you have to bring your best self to both of them.
Yeah, the best athletes on the planet are in the zone.
Yeah, in the zone.
Collette, if you want to talk a little bit about what individuals and how they can learn more about your work.
Yeah, sure. We're on very simply, mainly on Instagram, brainsports.team. We do like workshops and coaching and all kinds of things, mainly focused on athletes and coaches. Um, so you can find us mainly on Instagram.
I want you to think about a time or an opportunity where you just shook your head at an unbelievable moment of bias and made you go, "What on earth?"
Um, my example's maybe not a traditional one, but it's when I was working in Nigeria. This young woman, her name was Fadima, and she was only 13 years old. She was to be married to a 35-year-old 2 weeks later. And I carry her with me to this day because I went in there with this is a what on earth moment for me. And it's profound in my body because I remember thinking, how dare I come in here with my grand notions of whatever that was. I was COO of the Nike Foundation, everything, and this little girl was sitting there, and I was like, I can share all the ideas in the world with this young woman, and none of them are likely to happen in her lifetime. That's the truth. And so, what I decided in that moment was to look in her eyes and say, whenever I'm talking on a stage or whenever I have the freedom and opportunity to speak, I'll channel that young woman. So, like I'm doing right now. So, that's that's gender bias, I guess, everything bias, poverty bias. But to me, until those issues are resolved in the world, most people don't even realize those things are going on anymore. So that sticks with me to this day, and that's what I'd love to share. Fatima's story.
We're in such a privileged position to even say that we can offer communication coaching for leaders. It's such a first world problem. You helped us articulate that through your story of Fatima. She doesn't have that choice culturally. She doesn't get a choice to make her voice be heard.
That's right. And we have to keep communicating and talking about these stories. And that, to me, that creates what you're doing is, you don't have to be doing this podcast, but you choose to do it. So it's communication, storytelling, and we all need that. So very grateful for your podcast.
We're grateful for you and for the connection to you and to stay connected and learn more about brain sports. Thank you so much for your time today, Collette.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate you both.
If you have listened to 3 or more episodes of the Speak with Presence podcast, that tells me you're finding some value in it. And now it's time for you to rate and review the show. But here's the thing, it's not intuitive to do that. Most of you are listening on your Apple Podcast app. So if you're in the Apple Podcast app and you're listening to this episode, you will be in the episode. So you need to click on the 3 dots next to the title and click the drop down where it says Go to Show. Once you're in the show, you will go past all of the episodes down towards the bottom, past the trailer, and it says Ratings and Reviews. Tap Write a Review and enter your review right there. This is the very best way to seamlessly allow Apple to suggest it to other people just like you. It's really meaningful to us to hear your specifics about the show. Thank you so much. I can feel you noodling on something.
I'm noodling. I don't noodle all day, but man, when I noodle, I noodle. Please noodle.